I was saying that on Friday night that we had a really good turnout for a hockey event. We were next door at the rink. We plan once a month generally to come back to the church and do an event. And this was our week. We were going to order a pizza. We were going to have a fun event. And I asked the kids, I looked out over all the kids who were there and said, okay, who's all coming for pizza? I just need to count numbers. And a bunch of them said yes. Most of them said yes, actually. I was quite pleased with that. A few said, not sure, I don't know if I can come. And usually those ones I assume, just on the way that it usually goes, most of them don't make it over to the church afterwards for our little party time. But that's okay. I figured out how many pieces we needed, how much pizza we needed. I phoned over, I ordered the pizza, and was told, well, we're actually kind of almost out of pizza dough. We have pizza dough. We're having a pizza party. So we kind of negotiated down, and instead of, we weren't quite able to get enough pizzas that we needed. Well, that's okay. We'll make do with what we've got. Well, we'll just tell the kids, don't be pigs. All right. So we moved over to the church, and I was going to go pick up the pizzas, and I realized pretty much everybody who told me they didn't think they were going to come did. All of a sudden, we had 5 or 6 extras. In fact, a couple of kids who weren't at hockey came to the pizza party. This is a good problem. I like that problem. We had almost 30 people here for pizza. But I'm also in my head thinking, I don't have enough pizza. And Jeff was there saying, in the Bible it talks about this feeding the 5,000, where God turns the fish and the bread to extra. And my response, I have to say, was, hey, I'm preaching about that passage on Sunday. My response should have been, hey, we should pray like that. But God is amazing. God can do it even when we forget that little piece. Because I went to pick up the pizzas and he said, you know what? We had somebody who didn't show up to pick up the pizzas. So I do have some more for you. And we ended up, I got to the end of the night, I looked in the box, and I wish I could say there were 12 basketfuls, like there were in the miracle that we're going to look at. But there was one piece left. We had enough. You see, we come to a part in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus is taking a group of really tired disciples. And they go across the lake to get some refuge, to get away from the crowds, but the crowds follow them. And the disciples, I think, this isn't spelled out in the Gospel, but I think they're a little disappointed because they'd be looking forward. They've gotten back together with Jesus after a period apart. They're looking forward to this time of just spending some time with Him and spending some time in prayer. And guess what? Thousands of people follow Him. I would be disappointed. I've got this opportunity this week to get away for a couple of days, to get together with all the pastors in Alberta. We're just going to spend some time. We basically go to church for a week. And we go to church 3 times a day for 4 days. And it's an opportunity just to hear from God and to kind of refresh your batteries a little bit. And I got to be honest, if everybody in need follows me down there, I'm going to be disappointed. Because it's just a time to get away. And I think the disciples were. But Jesus looked out on the crowds and He saw people who were like sheep without a shepherd. And He looked out over the crowds and He had great compassion on the people who were there waiting for Him. And He looked out and He knew that they needed teaching and they needed hope and they needed to know that there was purpose to life. And so He began to teach them earnestly. The disciples put up with it. But as the day went on, they were ready for it to end. Jesus, these people got to go eat. Can we send them away for a little while? Can we get rid of the crowd? Go tell them to find some food. a bite to eat. We haven't had anything to eat all day. We're kind of famished. We don't have any food here. We got to go find something. And Jesus gives them a challenge. No, you feed them. What? We don't have any food. No, we don't have anything here. What are you talking, Jesus? No, come on. Let's get rid of the crowd. Let's be serious here for a minute. Tell them to go away. But he doesn't. And they go out and they find, we know the story. I think most people have heard this in Sunday school at some point. You probably know the gist of the story, that they go out and they find the boy who is well prepared. And there's nobody except this kid who's prepared for lunch. He's got 5 little barley loaves. I'm told that the barley in the Gospel of Mark, we find that in the other Gospels. And barley was the cheapest of the grains. It's not very much. This is not a loaf of bread. These are little buns. He's got a couple of little salted fish. They're in a town. They go across. We talked about this town a while back. It's the town of, literally, salted fish is what it's called. That's what he's got. That's what this town was driven by economically. He's got a couple of little fish. And Jesus organizes the people. If I'm the disciples, I'm saying, can't we just, quickly get this over with, throw them some food? No, he organizes the people. He takes time. He gets them into groups. He has them sit down. He has them say grace, wash their hands, do everything they're supposed to do before a meal. Gets them organized, passes it out, and we know the story. There's a lot of food left over. 12 basketfuls. After everybody eats and was satisfied. They eat and they're satisfied. The disciples are tired. And sometimes when we're tired, that plays a role in the way that we look at the world and the way that we look at other people. Because of this, and it's fair that they're tired. I mean, they've just gone out. They've done this ministry because they are so tired. Because they're ready for this break. They underestimate people, including Jesus. They underestimate the need. They don't understand the people's needs spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And worst of all, they underestimate the possibility. Yeah, they've seen miracles. They've even performed miracles as they've been out. They've done great things. But there's just something about being tired that plays a role in our life. This Sunday, we've already done this as a test with some people in the church, but this Sunday, a year ago, this Sunday of the time change, first Sunday in November, 5 of us who were here this morning who were very tired. We were in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, midway. We got our flight interrupted halfway through. We had just gotten off a plane that we had sat on for 15 plus hours. I'll tell you, I never wanted to get off a plane as badly as I wanted to get off that stupid plane. We had been sitting there for hours. We were tired. And you know what? I don't know that we made any great mistakes because we were tired, but tired does make problems. And sometimes when we're really tired, we miss possibilities, and the disciples miss possibilities. We often look at this miracle and we focus on, look what this neat thing Jesus did. But I want us to also note that the disciples almost missed out on something critical because they're tired. And what's the difference between the disciples and Jesus? It is that Jesus had compassion. He's tired too. He's grieving the loss of his cousin John. But the disciples have lost their perspective and Jesus has not. Isaiah 53, we've been slowly reading this through our service. We're going to read the rest when we come to the communion table in a moment. Jesus understood something. Jesus understood that he was there to be a servant who sacrificed. And that brought compassion back into perspective. Sometimes we look at stories like this and say, well, it was easy for Jesus. He was God. And the answer is no, it wasn't easy for Jesus. Because we're told in Philippians that he laid aside his divinity. It wasn't that he wasn't divine, he just put aside that so that he could rely on the Holy Spirit just as any other believer would. That's how he did his miracles. He had to be in reliance of his Father. He became one of us, fully human. But what made a difference and why Jesus was able to succeed, whereas often the disciples and ourselves don't, is he was able to continue to have perspective on the needs of this world and on his place in it. He knew that he was there to bring hope to a fallen world. He knew that he had crowds there that wanted to understand, was there a purpose for life? People who were part of a nation that had lost track of what God really wanted them to be. And Jesus looked at them with compassion and he met all of their needs. Spiritually, emotionally, and even physically. They were all tired. They were hungry. They had done lots. They were able to say, hey, I've done my share. It's time for somebody else to take up the needs of these people and give me just a few minutes of a break. To give me a little rest. There is nothing wrong with the rest that they desire. We talked about that last week. If you missed it, it's on the YouTube. You can go to our website and find it. It's there. God does call us to rest. God does call us to stop. Because that brings back the perspective. And the proof of it, they miss their rest and they lose their perspective. But even in the midst of their need for rest, Jesus says, well, sometimes you've got to fight through it. Sometimes the crowds are going to follow you. Sometimes we desperately need that night of sleep. And the kids cry. It happens. Sometimes we need just that day of break. And the phone rings. Those things do happen. And we should try to avoid it, to get away for those moments of rest, those moments of regaining perspective. But when it does not happen, that does not excuse us from the needs that are out there. So easy it is to say that I've done my share, just leave me alone. But when we do that, we can miss the greatest things that God can do. We have many distractions. So often we have such a materialistic society. We want to chase after those things. We should be able to play with our toys that we get. But the disciples do very little. And what is really remarkable to me is what Jesus takes and does with that little. They don't have much to share. They don't have much time. They don't have much energy. They don't have much ability. They are lacking in it all. But when compassion and service become our heart cry, as it does for Jesus, it's amazing what can happen. We can accomplish nothing on our own, but when we give ourselves to Jesus and he acts within us, we chase after his call and his desire, can we really be left with 12 basketfuls at the end? Where little is turned into something great. Where nothing is made into not just something, but is made into the riches that we have. God can take what little we have, what little energy we've got, what little time we've got, what little ability we've got and turn it into something great. Jesus was willing to sacrifice all that we may have so much. So we're going to come to this commemoration of the sacrifice of Christ. And I'm going to invite our elders to come forward.